It is 10:48 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've just arrived at work, James. I was listening to you in my car on the way here. As an owner of 2 guinea pigs, I'm still in shock that there is an awareness week for them and that it has been postponed. Natalie speaks for many people when she writes, James, honestly, if I queue for 10 hours tomorrow and don't see Theo Usherwood, I shall be roundly disappointed. And Susanna brings the real stories. St Thomas's Hospital has gone into a form of lockdown now to stop huge crowds using the facilities. All staff must show ID to get in. It's unbelievable that people snuck in to sleep in the foyer. As Theo Usherwood rather portentously put it, that is between them and their maker. Stories I had to triple check because I thought that they couldn't possibly be true. Chapter 766. Preston North End Football Club have defended their decision to issue a lifetime ban to a supporter who tweeted them, "Will I be ejected from the stadium if I boo during a minute's silence for the death of the Queen?" And that's remarkable on 2 fronts. Number 1, it was a question, and he's been banned for life for asking it. And number 2, the game in which he was thinking of booing, I don't think went ahead anyway. But Preston North End have defended their decision to issue a lifetime ban to a supporter after he tweeted, "Will I be ejected from the stadium if I boo during a minute's silence for the death of the Queen?" And I mean it when I say that this is one of those stories that makes you wonder whether it is true or not. But Preston have told a newspaper, as a football club, we acknowledge every individual's right to free speech and personal opinions. But you don't, do you? You're like the fellow that rang in yesterday. You don't acknowledge every person's right to free speech and personal opinions. He only asked a question. In this specific case, because if you'd said yes, you would be ejected from the stadium, he probably wouldn't have booed, for heaven's sake. In this specific case, a series of tweets were put into the public domain and by association linked to this football club. They say there is a deleted tweet which crossed the boundary of acceptability, and by associating us as a club, a stadium ban was issued. Remarkable, whichever way you look at it. Unless the deleted tweet is toxic, but the headline suggests that the tweet after which he was banned was, "Will I be ejected from the stadium if I boo during a minute's silence for the death of a Queen?" So what's going on? On a serious note, there is a culture of bullying abroad that now infects almost every corner of British life. The most populist corners of the British media now do little else but bully people, whether it used to be Brussels bureaucrats, foreign workers, single mothers, unemployed people. But, there are hardly any unemployed people left. The ones that are unemployed are often ill, something we slightly overlooked in yesterday's phone-in. We've left the European Union, and that is inevitably going appallingly badly, but the people who told you it would be brilliant can't yet bring themselves to talk about it. Single mothers feels like a very Victorian area of attack, although they've had a go at resurrecting that in the last couple of weeks. Daily Telegraph ran a story about how nuclear families were the healthiest or whatever it may be, which is always a veiled attack on people who don't fall into a very uniform way of living. And who's left? Who are you going to attack now? Answer anybody. High court judges, lefty lawyers, doctors, train drivers, Meghan Markle. She's taken a hell of a lot of slack, hasn't she, from the professional bullies. God knows what they'd be doing if it wasn't for Meghan Markle, a largely blameless individual, taking absolute skiploads of abuse from all of the usual gammony subjects. Where would one go next? Answer. Anybody not properly. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It's been bothering me all morning. Do you remember that brief period during Boris Johnson's premiership when every politician that appeared on television from the government had 643 Union flags draped behind them and a picture of the Queen? Do you remember that? Not normal, I'm afraid. There's no way their offices are like that in normal times. And if they are, it's not normal. Yeah, and do you remember the guy at Oxford University who voted against taking down a picture of the Queen in the junior common room at his Oxford College, or the senior common room, anyway, the common room at his Oxford? He voted against it, but the newspapers got hold of his name and ruined his life because his fellow students voted to take down a picture of the Queen, largely overseas students who felt that it was either irrelevant or inappropriate. Do you remember that? It's in the sort of mad post-Brexit, I don't know what you'd call it, outbreak of absolute madness. So that's what's happened here. That's why I have some sympathy for the decision makers, thinking, well, look, if a grad student at Oxford who's done absolutely nothing wrong and voted to keep a picture of a Queen on the wall can have his life ruined By his own account, we spoke to Aditya Chakraborty at The Guardian who tracked him down, and his life was turned upside down. He's got post-traumatic stress disorder. Don't laugh. Imagine what it's like to be essentially accused of hating the Queen in the biggest selling newspapers in the country. You Google your name, and for the rest of your life, that stuff's going to come up. So that's what they're frightened of. They're frightened of the biggest bullies. Remember the bullies at school? Do you remember the bullies at school? Even if you weren't bullied, you're going to remember them. You're thinking of their name right now. Have a little think about how much of your behaviour you adapted in order to avoid the attentions of the bullies who were, luckily for you, largely bullying somebody else. How did you change your behaviour? What did you do? Keep your head down is the most obvious way to behave. Sometimes shamefully, we perhaps almost join in. Because if we're on the side of the bully, then the bully's less likely to turn his attention on ourselves. Perhaps you just sort of thought, okay, I'm not going to do that then, because I'm not going to do what I know to be right, because the bully will attack me as a consequence. Just think about it. However long ago it was, I reckon you can remember. You can remember what it was like. I mean, at my kind of school, you get your head flushed down the toilet by bullies. Thankfully, something that never happened to me. But if it was happening to someone else, there was always that vague sense of relief. Oh, thank God it's not me. I used to get teased rather than bullied because in the context of my school, I was quite common, would you believe? I wasn't posh enough. And the next term, a lad arrived, lovely lad, still in touch, and he had a mild Geordie accent. Actually, it was a Mackham accent. It was a Sunderland, a very, very, very mild Sunderland accent. So suddenly, the fact that I came from Kidderminster no longer mattered because this lad actually had a regional accent. So he got all the sort of teasing, all the class-based teasing, and I was relieved, so relieved that I think perhaps I even joined in sometimes. But actual bullying, physical bullying, mental bullying, psychological bullying, what measures are you going to take to avoid it? Now you have people, riding high in this country in both politics. Is there a bigger bully in the country than Priti Patel? She's literally found to be a bully. They've paid hundreds of thousands of pounds of our money to someone who was a victim of her bullying. And until very recently, she was the second or third most powerful politician in the country, fated by the Daily Mail, which has turned bullying into a business model. So that's why it happens. And that's the flags in the background. Even the politicians who join in with the bullies are frightened of the bullies. Well, we better have 46 flags, Tristram. We better have 46 flags in the next press conference, Tristram, because Patel had 66, 37 at hers. Count the flags, Keith. Keith, count the flags. It's madness, right? If you want to put a picture of the Queen on your wall, fair play to you. It's lovely. I'd rather have a picture of my mum on my wall, as it goes. But if you don't want to put a picture of the Queen on your wall, that's your lookout too. Whatever job you do. The idea that it briefly became a sort of competition, it's exactly of a piece with how Centre Parks has banned or sought or thought to do one of the craziest things in the history of crazy things.